You think repetition in scripture is just an ancient memory device. It's not. It is a highly calculated psychological intervention. Let's look at why one specific question is forced upon your psyche 31 consecutive times and the terrifying mathematical precision behind where it drops. 78 verses make up Surah Rahman, and 31 of them, nearly half the chapter, are the exact same question, repeated over and over. Looking at this early calligraphy, the repetition feels like a poetic choice, a rhythmic device common in ancient literature to give the recitation a sense of beauty. Surah Rahman isn't just poetry. It is a calculated, mathematical print of the cosmos. Let's clear the static and begin. But there is a specific psychological friction that occurs when you are forced to answer the same question 31 times. It counters a process called hedonic adaptation, the speed at which the human brain turns a miracle into a baseline expectation. We see this in the frustration we feel when a video buffers for 3 seconds, forgetting we are accessing the sum of human knowledge through a piece of glass in our pockets. The miracle becomes invisible the moment it becomes reliable. Surviving this world isn't about moving faster, it is about knowing when to stand absolutely still. Let me show you the blueprint. We build modern walls thinking we have outgrown the ancient tests. We haven't. Break the illusion and witness the cosmic balance. These 31 verses function as a rhythmic strike against that habit. They are designed to strip away the ego of the listener by forcing a constant, inescapable confrontation with the reality of their surroundings. This confrontation isn't directed at mankind alone. Surah Rahman is unique because it explicitly addresses 2 distinct species at the same time, the Thaqalayn. The text forces an inescapable confrontation. Angels cannot disobey, and oceans cannot rebel. It is directly cornering the only 2 creations carrying the terrifying burden of free will. The evidence is in the grammar. The verse uses the suffix kuma, the Arabic dual form. It doesn't ask, which favor do you deny? It asks, which favor do both of you deny? It is calling out to humanity, created from the earth, and the jinn, created from smokeless fire. These 2 groups are singled out because they share a trait absent in the rest of the natural world, the capacity to choose. Angels and oceans submit by their very nature, but humans and jinn possess free will. With that choice comes the ability to be arrogant, to look at a universe that sustains your every breath and believe you are the one in control. Humanity builds massive empires thinking they are permanent. But without gratitude, the solid ground beneath you is nothing but fragile glass. When you map where these 31 questions fall in the text, the arrangement follows a specific distribution that mirrors the structure of Islamic theology. The first 8 repetitions appear alongside descriptions of the physical world, the sky, the sun, and the provisions of the earth. Then, the imagery shifts. The text describes the collapse of the universe and the reality of hellfire. In this section, the question is repeated exactly 7 times. This aligns with the theological description of Jahannam, which is said to have exactly 7 gates. The final section transitions to paradise. Here, the question is asked 16 times. Since Jannah has 8 gates, the surah uses 8 repetitions describing 2 supreme gardens, then states, and besides these are 2 other gardens, following up with 8 more. The structure provides 8 reflections on the world you currently inhabit, 7 warnings for the gates of punishment, and 16 invitations to the gates of reward. The math provides a physical and spiritual map of a soul's journey. This rigid structure is designed to illustrate a single principle, Al-Mizan, or the balance. The text presents Al-Mizan as a universal law of justice and proportion. It is the invisible order that keeps the physical and moral worlds from collapsing into chaos. Surah Ar-Rahman functions as a structural audit, weighing the evidence of the world against the weight of our gratitude. The audit subverts chronology. The text states, God taught the Quran before mentioning the creation of man. This sequence establishes a hierarchy of value. First, the source, the most merciful. Second, the guidance, revelation. Third, the vessel, mankind. And finally, the tool, intellect. Intellect or bayan is the faculty of clear expression, granted so we can articulate the balance. Placing guidance before existence argues that life's purpose was established before life itself began. Our physical form and our intellect are simply the mechanisms required to process that primary gift. The surah proves this balance through symmetrical parallelism, listing physical bounties in perfectly calculated pairs. Watch how this golden scale rotates. The surah links the flawless physical balance of the cosmos, the precise calculated orbits of the sun and moon, directly to the moral requirement for humans to weigh with equity in the marketplace. In this framework, to be unjust or wasteful in our daily lives is to violate the exact same fundamental law that keeps the stars in their orbits. The text is not just a poem, it is a cross-examination in a cosmic courtroom, addressing two separate creations simultaneously. Everything we thought we knew about justice was just inverted. Social equity is not a human construct, it is a strict celestial requirement. We judge our lives by volume, but the universe demands perfect equilibrium. A single act of exploitation disrupts the entire overarching cosmic architecture. To truly grasp this chapter, we must dissect its vocabulary at the root. The surah begins with Ar-Rahman, a term built on the Falan morphology, denoting absolute, all-encompassing fullness and an intense compassion intrinsic to his very essence. Look closely at this divine title. When you fracture it to its core, it reveals a mercy that birthed the entire universe. This is not simply passive compassion. This is an aggressive, structural law that sustains your very existence every single second. Crucially, it introduces Al-Mizan, derived from the root wa, zai, nun, representing the ultimate tool of balance. This term signifies both physical equilibrium in the cosmos and the strict moral demand for social justice. Look closely at this specific word. When we pull it apart into its base roots, it fundamentally means to weigh. It is the noun of instrument. The universe isn't just existing, it's being actively measured. The cosmos is a perfect physical scale. These roots form a divine DNA. The very same balance holding the stars in place demands equity in your daily life. The text also contrasts the origins of sentient life. Mankind forged from salsalin kalfakhar, a brittle clay echoing our fragile reality, and the jinn from marijin min narin, a smokeless, agitated flame. Furthermore, it speaks of two seas meeting, governed by a Barzakh, an unseen divine barrier forbidding chaotic transgression. Over all this reigns Wajhu Rabbik, the eternal face of your Lord. Humanity is not alone in witnessing this equilibrium. The text places two distinct creations on trial: humans forged from clay and the jinn, an unseen, intelligent species created from smokeless fire. The physical universe functions as a shared testing ground where the mathematical laws of nature serve as undeniable evidence presented to both species simultaneously. The entire chapter operates as an aggressive, repetitive, cosmic cross-examination. This command bridges cosmology and ethics. It implies that if the entire universe functions on a precise equilibrium, then human disruptions, whether through unfair trade or ecological waste, are direct violations of the cosmic architecture. Human morality is expected to mirror cosmic mathematical perfection. The earthly resources cited as physical evidence during this trial include our immediate sustenance: sweet-smelling plants, husked grain, pearls, and coral. Do not be distracted by the beauty of these worldly resources. Look closely at the hidden architecture beneath them. 31 repetitions build inescapable rhetorical pressure. The text corners its audience, forcing a direct acknowledgement of the true source of their reality. This data visualization illustrates the statistical weight of that interrogation. A single refrain is repeated 31 times, making up nearly 40% of the chapter's 78 verses. The question remains the same for both humans and jinn. Which then of your Lord's blessings do you both deny? This timeline tracks the 31 times that question is asked. It acts as a relentless interrogation, forcing the audience to confront divine evidences. One node highlights the Lord of the two Easts and two Wests, establishing absolute dominion over a planetary scale. The next node expands to show the two seas. They are seen churning against each other, yet they are separated by an impenetrable, invisible barrier that keeps sweet water and salt water from mixing. What the human eye sees are two chaotic oceans crashing together. But if we tear back the veil of the unseen, you will see a flawless, frozen barrier. The chaos is an illusion. The physical laws of the Creator are absolute. The constant repetition of the refrain is a mathematical tightening of the net. It corners the audience, leaving no room to ignore the divine source of these phenomena. At verse 26, the litany of favors stops. The rhythm shifts as the surah introduces the concept of Fana, or annihilation. Eventually, all physical reality, data, and worldly favors face inevitable annihilation. This temporary decay contrasts with the absolute permanence of the Creator. The ultimate favor is the realization that we must invest in the eternal rather than the perishable, that only the eternal is worthy of our ultimate attachment. Yet a paradox remains. Why does a surah named for the most merciful include visceral descriptions of hell, of boiling water and molten brass? The surah argues that mercy cannot exist without justice. Warning the creation of the consequences of imbalance is in itself a final act of grace, giving the accountable being a chance to choose a different path. For those who heed that warning and uphold the balance, the surah maps out a reward with the same mathematical symmetry. This blueprint shows the highest tier, 2 gardens of gold reserved for the foremost in faith, filled with spreading branches and flowing springs. Panning down, we see the second tier, 2 gardens situated below the first, made of silver, dark green with gushing springs. The hierarchy of the afterlife is shown as a perfect architectural reflection of the level of God consciousness each being achieved during their life on earth. This lattice locking into place represents the ultimate lesson of the refrain. To acknowledge these favors is to recognize our place in a balanced system. Faith is the moment one aligns one's life with that cosmic architecture, choosing gratitude over denial. This revelation wasn't meant to just be recited. It was sent to ignite a dead heart and enforce the balance. Because when this temporary reality shatters, the great event, Al-Waqi'ah, will sort humanity forever. The balance has been set. The choice is yours.